You worked hard today. You crossed things off the list. You showed up. You kept going. And tonight, lying in bed, the first thought that comes is not rest. It is a quiet, familiar voice that says, "It still wasn't enough." Where does that voice come from? And why do so many of us believe it? This is Tom, 45 years old, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Tom owns a small hardware store that his father opened in 1987. The same store Tom grew up in, sweeping floors on Saturday mornings while his dad talked to customers like they were old friends, because they were. Tom took over 11 years ago. He modernized, he expanded the hours, stayed open through 2 recessions and a pandemic that took out 3 competitors on the same block. By every reasonable measure, Tom is doing well. And yet, he follows a guy on Instagram who is 38 and just opened his 4th location. He reads about former classmates who sold their startups and retired to Portugal. The store is good, the life is good. But the feeling that he should be further along, that someone, somewhere is doing more with the same hours he has, that feeling never really leaves. It just gets quieter at night and louder in the morning. It was his daughter who said it. Clara, 13 years old, sharp the way only teenagers can be. She looked across the dinner table and said, "Dad, you were always somewhere else, even when you were right here." Tom put down his phone. His wife did not look surprised. That night, after the kids were in bed, Tom sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that went cold. He realized Clara was right. He had been physically present for years, sitting at the dinner table, attending the school plays, watching the games from the sideline. But mentally, he was always somewhere else, always measuring, always comparing, running a quiet calculation in the back of his mind about where he stood relative to some invisible standard he had never actually chosen. He did not know where that standard came from. He just knew it had been there as long as he could remember, and it had never once told him he was enough. A few weeks later, an older customer came in. Walter, 74 years old. The kind of man who asked how you were doing and actually waited for the answer. Tom found himself talking, not about the store, about the feeling, the never-enough feeling. Walter listened, and when Tom finished, the old man said, "Tom, I spent 30 years running a business 2 miles from here, made decent money, lost some, made some more." He paused. "The year I felt most successful was not the year I made the most. It was the year I stopped asking how I was doing compared to everyone else and started asking how I was doing compared to who I wanted to be." Those were not complicated words, but they landed somewhere deep, in the place where the quiet voice lived. And for a moment, the voice went still. Walter told Tom a story his grandfather used to tell. There was a farmer in western Pennsylvania who tended his fields every spring with care and patience. His neighbor planted twice as many acres, bought newer equipment, talked loudly at the market about yields and expansion plans. Every summer, the farmer looked across the fence and felt the familiar pull. Am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? One autumn, an early frost came before the neighbor's crop was ready. A large harvest, planted too wide, managed too thin, much of it was lost. The farmer's smaller fields, tended closely, came in clean. His grandfather said afterward, "A man who tends his own acre well will always eat. A man who is always looking at his neighbor's field will eventually neglect his own." Tom heard that story and thought about his store, his family, his 1 acre. He had been so busy looking across the fence that he had almost missed what was growing right in front of him. Tom spent the next few months thinking differently, not dramatically, not with a sudden reinvention, just quieter, more deliberate. 5 shifts in thinking that slowly changed the way the voice inside him spoke. The first shift, replace the scoreboard with a compass. A scoreboard tells you where you are relative to others. A compass tells you whether you are moving in the direction you actually chose. Tom sat down one evening and wrote out what he actually wanted, not what he thought he should want, not what success was supposed to look like, what he, Tom, actually wanted from the years he had left. It was a shorter list than he expected, and most of it he already had. The second shift: measure progress, not position. Position is where you are compared to someone else. Progress is where you are compared to where you were. Tom pulled out records from 11 years ago. He looked at what he had built: the customer base, the community, the fact that his father's store was still standing when 3 others on the block were not. He had been so focused on where he was not that he never stopped to see how far he had actually come. The third shift: let other people's success be information, not indictment. The 38-year-old with 4 locations was not proof that Tom had failed. He was just a different person making different choices with different circumstances Tom knew nothing about. Tom unfollowed 3 accounts that consistently made him feel smaller, not out of bitterness, out of self-preservation. The same way you close a window when the wind is making you cold. The fourth shift: define enough before the day starts. The reason enough never arrives is because most of us never define it. We chase a feeling, not a finish line, and feelings move. Tom started writing down each morning 3 specific things that, if happened by end of day, would mean the day was a good one. On most days, those 3 things happened, and for the first time in years, the evening felt like arrival instead of shortfall. The fifth shift: protect what is actually yours. Tom thought about Clara. Dad, you were always somewhere else. He couldn't buy back those evenings, but he could decide what happened next. He put his phone in the kitchen drawer every evening at 6. He showed up to Clara's soccer games and watched the game instead of checking email on the sideline. The store would have good years and hard years. That was always going to be true. But his daughter was 13 once, and that window was closing whether he looked at his phone or not. A year later, the Tom's store is the same size, same address, same sign out front. He did not expand. He did not reinvent himself. But something changed in how he stands inside it. There's a wall near the register where Tom put up a photo. His father behind the counter, 1991. Same store, different decade. He looks at that photo when the quiet voice starts, and he remembers what Walter said. The goal was never to be the biggest. The goal was to still be standing, to still mean something, to still be the kind of place where people feel taken care of. Tom looks around his store. He is still standing. He still means something. That voice has not disappeared entirely. Maybe it never will. But it's quieter now, and Tom has stopped giving it the last word. The never enough feeling is not a character flaw. It is what happens when we let the world set the standard for a life only we are living. You are not behind. You are tending your acre, and that acre, tended with care and honest effort, is more than enough for a life worth having. If Tom's story felt familiar today, drop the word enough in the comments. And if someone you love is caught in that comparison loop right now, share this with them. Because sometimes the most generous thing we can do for another person is remind them that what they have built already matters. Mindshift Tales. Shift your mind, change your life.